depend on the situation of the company. But going back to your original question regarding the SEC. So what happened? The Jobs Act was approved. They said, okay, we're going to allow mere mortals like us to invest in the next Facebook, in the next Google, but, oh, we have to protect the widow who's not sophisticated, that person who doesn't have enough money to risk, because this is, again, very risky investment. So we're going to give the task to the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the task of determining, of redefining what is an accredited investor. We've been waiting 2 years, more than 2 years, for that regulation, okay? And it's still not approved. Now, there has been progress on that regulation, and I think we'll probably see it this year, 2015. But I don't expect that the deviation is going to be significant. What will happen, though, is that it probably will allow people who might not be accredited in the sense of monetary of money, of net worth, but might be sophisticated in the sense that they know the industry. So if my brother, say, just graduated from MIT with a PhD in nanotechnology, he definitely doesn't have a $1 million net worth. As a matter of fact, he has a negative net worth because he has to pay for all the student loans, right? But he knows about nanotechnology more than 99.9% of the population in the world. So why would it be sensible to prevent him from investing in nanotechnology companies that he knows better than most sophisticated investors? Okay? And that, I think, that's the way that the SEC is thinking about this. Yeah.
The other issue too is that you're essentially starting a public corporation without going public and going through a registration process.
Yeah. And
there are limitations on how many investors you can have in certain sub-S's of 35 investors.
Absolutely, absolutely. The Jobs Act actually has, six different titles, six different sections. And some of them have to do with how many people you need to have as a minimum before you have to disclose publicly the information, i.e. what is a public placement versus a private placement, what is allowed in terms of number of investors, and all of that is being revised as part of the Jobs Act. And all of that is being revised by the SEC, but it has not been finalized yet. So it will go, I just used the example of the person who is sophisticated in a way other than money, to exemplify one of the potential changes, but there will be other changes. Now the number of minimum investors that you can have will probably be higher before you have to make disclosures to the SEC, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? And I'm not going to go into much more detail because it gets fairly complicated, but suffice to say that these platforms in the foreseeable future will probably open up to many of us. Now, as you can imagine, since the technology to do crowdfunding already exists in the forms of Kickstarter and Indiegogo has already said, well, we're interested in equity crowdfunding. We know how to do this. We want to expand our pie, our scope of influence, and we might consider doing equity crowdfunding as well, right? Same way, these folks are definitely looking at expanding their clientele. Okay? So it is a really interesting dynamic, a really interesting time to be in private equity and venture capital. A lot of people in the establishment, particularly investment bankers, will tell you that crowdfunding is terrible, that it will be a disaster, that widows will lose their entire savings, right? And again, I don't want to be extreme in either of the two positions. I think there's reasonability to some of those arguments, but I think there's something also behind it, which is protecting your turf, right? Protecting your territory. Investment bankers make a lot of money in their commissions. So we'll see what happens. It is an evolving world. The third form is crowd lending. And crowd lending is, as I mentioned earlier, the possibility for you to obtain funds, borrow funds from the crowd. And I really like this platform. Why? Because for most businesses, 50% or more of businesses in the U.S. start or need less than $50,000 to start operating. So if you look at the statistics, 30,000, 40,000 is typically enough to start a business nowadays in the U.S. And I think the maximum for both of them is about 35,000 if I'm not mistaken. So you can actually borrow from Lending Club or from Prosper in occasions when the bank will say no to you, or will tell you no. Why? Because they are putting together those who want with those who need. Want what and need what? Of course, money, but in very different ways. I need it because I am an entrepreneur. I'm starting out my business. I need $30,000 to get started, but I just graduated from college. I don't have a credit history. No matter how handsome I am, I'm not going to get a loan from a commercial bank. There's no way, right? I have a phenomenal idea, but I'm not going to get a loan because I don't have credit history. I can go to Lending Club and potentially, they do a thorough risk assessment of course, of credit. But potentially you might have a better chance with them because it's not a bank that is lending you. It is you, it is you, it is you in very tiny participations. I actually have accounts with Lending Club and Prosper. I have had them for about 3 years. And the reason why I started looking at this was twofold. One, because I was interested in this new way of lending, in this new crowd lending platform. But number two, because I had money on my Chase savings account paying the extraordinary figure of 0.1% in interest. On a typical month, I was making like 10 cents in interest income on my savings account. I imagine that for those of you who have a savings account, it's not that different of a situation. In terms of the percentage, hopefully you make more than 10 cents a month in interest payments. But I moved I opened two small accounts, one with Lending Club and one with Prosper. And so far on Prosper, I invested $250, which is the minimum that they asked for you to open an account with them. That means that I invested in 10 different businesses because the minimum investment is $25. So by definition, you're diversifying your risk tremendously. So $250 in 10 loans. None of the 10 have defaulted. So far, everyone has paid its loan back. And my return, last time I checked a few days ago, was about 8.4%. It's a little bit better than 0.1%, right? So for those who depend on fixed income, and a lot of people depend on fixed income for their income, for their expenses, this might be an interesting way to go about it. I'm not saying put all your money there, but it's worth testing the waters. Interestingly though, I also opened an account at the same time, same day actually, with Lending Club with the same amount, $250. And Lending Club, based on some research I have done and some analysis I have done, has more strict parameters in terms of lending than Prosper. At least that has been my experience, right? So they will be much more, or they do a more conservative assessment of your credit risk, like any bank would do. Right? They'll check your FICO and they'll do what typically banks do. Not because they risk the money. It's not their money that is at risk. It is your money that is at risk. They're just an intermediary. They're a matchmaker. But they do have reputational risk. Right? If they start lending to people who will not repay, pretty soon they'll have no business, right? Because people will say, oh, don't even bother with Lending Club. Because they only have clients who cannot get a loan anywhere else, and therefore have a much higher risk profile, and therefore you're going to lose a lot of your principal, okay? And there might be some truth to that, but in reality, the issue here is that Lending Club and Prosper, during the financial crisis, were also offering much more reasonable rates. Not only were banks not willing to lend you after 2008, if in those rare occasions in which they were willing to lend you, the interest rate would be much higher than what you could get somewhere else. And so it was like the perfect storm in terms of trying to get funding. Okay? So in the case of Lending Club, going back to my comparison of the two, I also did 250, 10 loans of $25 each, and interestingly, 3 of them have defaulted, even though I chose credit risk A and B. That means that my return over 3 years, instead of the 8.4, it's about 2.5. Still much better than the 0.1, much better, like, I don't know, 3,000% better. But compared to Prosper, I haven't had that good of an experience here. But my point is, test the waters. Try it out, see what works best for you. Yes?
In Lending Club, do they, when they inform you about the risk level, let's say A, B, do they also give you details about the debt itself?
They give you detail enough so that you can decide what type of loan you will give. For example, since I started doing this, I wanted to be fairly risk averse, new platform after all. I invested a little money, but I also invested in those that I consider the lowest risk profile. And to me, those were, apart from those rated A or B by Lending Club and Prosper, those who were borrowing to refinance higher interest debt. Okay? A lot of them were refinancing credit card debt that was at 20%. They were going to refinance at 7%. So to me, that's smart because their cash flow is going to improve, right? So potentially, they're going to be in a better position to repay their loan. That's provided that they actually do that for the money, right?
More money again.
Right. That is provided they actually are responsible, but based on the rating A is only given to those who have a high FICO score. So think about it. If you have a very high FICO score, which allows you to get a rating of A, will you risk damaging your credit? I don't know. It's maybe yes, maybe not, but certainly if you default with Lending Club, that report is going to Equifax and TransUnion and all the other credit bureaus, just like you would with any other commercial loan, right? So they also tell you a little bit more information about the profile of the individual, where they reside, and what potential use they will give to the loan, etc. It's really interesting, really interesting dynamic. So that's Lending Club and Prosper for crowdlending. Any other questions regarding? Yes?
Do you have any options now that they defaulted on you?
No, the only option I have is my hope that Lending Club will have a fairly efficient collection agency. Because I am the lender, the risk is mine.
So they will pursue
They will
defaulters
pursue.
and then distribute whatever they get after they take their
Correct,
piece.
correct.
Do you get paid by the borrower, or does the Lending Club, do they pay Lending Club and Lending Club?
Directly by Lending Club, but it's via the borrower. Okay? So in essence, what you do is you issue mini notes, promissory notes. Promissory notes of $25 each. You know, which obviously in the regular banking world would be impossible to do. It's just not efficient, but in the computer age, it's easy to replicate. So basically what I have is 10 promissory notes, and that promissory note is, you promise to pay me my $25 back. And Lending Club would be the conduit by which you repay me with interest. Okay? That's why Lending Club doesn't take the risk. Okay?
It has to be $25, or could you have given $50?
I could have given much more, yeah. The minimum is $25. I just decided, for this experiment, to go with the lowest figure possible so that I could diversify my risk.
What were the particular companies you were looking at for the startups?
Huh?
Was there, were you looking at technology, was it?
They don't go into, in Lending Club and Prosper, they don't go into that level of detail. They just tell you whether it is for a small business purpose use, or it is to buy, say, equipment, or to make improvements on the business. But they don't tell you, oh, this is in the tech sector, or this is not in crowd lending. In the other two, they do, absolutely. In the equity-based crowdfunding, you actually get access to very detailed information. The financial statements, the projections, their actual sales, their clients. It's already a pretty interesting way to also do marketing research, as a matter of fact, yeah.
So in essence, if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to sell fresh fruit, what was it, fresh? Popsicle.
Fruit popsicles.
Your idea doesn't matter here at all.
If you're what?
You're only gonna be judged on your credit performance and what type of business you're open, not on the idea at all.
Yeah, for all purposes, what they use is your personal credit profile. They really have no way of knowing whether your business idea is good or not, because that's not their business. It is the business of the equity-based crowdfunders, absolutely, but not lending clubs and prosperers, okay? They're, in a way, they do a similar assessment as a bank would do. But, yeah,
There's like an evolved natural efficiencies for all lenders to minimize not just risk, but the processing or the assessment or the underwriting of the risk.
yes,
It almost all evolves to get away from a personal evaluation, I don't mean personal in terms of credit, in terms of the idea, and minimizing not paperwork, because that's what really brings the greatest returns. At least commitment to this particular loan, or this commitment to this particular endeavor is what makes it cost efficient in the lending money.
yeah,
And that happens whether it's Citibank, Bank of America, Lending Come Prosper, or an individual.
that's correct. That is correct. That's a very, very fair assessment of the way banks, lenders in general, operate.
And do you think that they, even though it's against the law, that they go through ethnic profiles? There are some groups that will pay more consistently than others,
Yeah.
and others that won't, and that it becomes an unstated kind of activity.
Well, it's the way they do the credit assessment is kind of a black box. You don't know what criteria they really use. I would say probably in these platforms it's less so. It's less likely. It's just because of the sheer volume. I don't think they really have the capacity, nor does it make cost-effective sense for them to do a profile that goes to that level of depth. I would think, but I might be wrong. I'm not privy to what that black box is.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, could be. Any other questions on crowd lending? Check, so that's we're good. All right, the other topic I wanted to share briefly with you is the concept of crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing has to do with that second element that I mentioned at the beginning. Remember, I started with money, but then I talked about time and I talked about people. Well, crowdsourcing is a way in which you can leverage the skill set of the crowd, and here I truly mean the world crowd, to do many, many different things. These are platforms that allow you, they're marketplaces for talent, for skills. Some of them specialize in certain areas. For example, Odesk is basically a marketplace of freelancers. So let's imagine that you need to develop a logo for your company, or that you need someone who knows how to program in HTML, or someone who can develop your website. You can go to Odesk and do a search, and it's fairly sophisticated the way they rank freelancers. Do a search by nationality, by experience, by the test that they have taken and passed, and that they become certified on certain expertise areas. The cost, of course, their portfolio, they show their portfolio, and you choose based on that analysis someone who might be in Connecticut, or might be in Sri Lanka, or might be in Ukraine. Okay? And they do that work virtually for you. They're like virtual assistants for you. But depending on your need for cost efficiencies or speed, this might be an excellent option for business owners. I think it's a really powerful tool, not as well known by most entrepreneurs, but really, really fascinating. I have actually used all three of them very successfully. I'm very, very happy with the work product of all three. For example, for one of my, I have a couple of entities. One of them, the holding company, required a new design. So I used 99 Designs to develop the brand image of that company. The way 99 Designs works is you bid out a project to designers. And I think they have, don't recall the exact number, but it's hundreds of thousands of designers worldwide. And they bid on your project, depending on how much you're willing to pay the winning bidder. And you start getting examples of your logo. And you might decide, you know what, none of this I like, so I'm just gonna call it off, you don't have to pay a penny. But if you actually like some of the designs, then you start creating a competition among those designers, and they go into a kind of a final round. And when you choose the final design, then you still have the opportunity to make revisions on that design. And all of that you do, in my case, I spent $299 to create the brand image, the logo, and the brand guide for my company. If you go through the normal channels, you might or might not get satisfaction in terms of your logo design because you're working maybe with an agency, right? Obviously, some designers see this as a threat, but some designers see this as an opportunity. Because now they're not selling just to your local potential clients, you're selling to the entire world. So it cuts both ways. In my case, as an entrepreneur, I found it an excellent tool. Fiverr, I used for something very similar, but it was just a test of a brand logo. And they designed that one for $5. $5, that's why it's called Fiverr. Because they do all sorts of things for $5. Yes?
So I've used some other things like this before, and some of them I never ended up going through the project because I find if you know exactly what you want, this works really well.
Yes.
If you're in need of a collaborative back and forth to kind of work out what it is you want, these don't work well because it's not set up to really work through a creative process. It's set up to be like, this is it. So if you exactly know what you want, you're willing to take what you get, it's great. But if you want a back and forth, you still really need someone you can be in front of and talk to.
Absolutely, absolutely. Depends on the scope of the project. It also depends on the platform that you choose. I would say that's absolutely right here. Here you have a lot more control of the process. You actually provide your potential designers with examples of the type of image or brand image that you like, the color palette that you prefer, the message that you want to convey. There are many, many rounds on 99, but of course you pay $2.99. Here you pay $5. So this is one that is much more variable because you get designers who will charge you $200 an hour and designers who will charge you $10 an hour. And you can choose the quality of the design, you can see the portfolio, and you can discuss offline with them what your expectations are. And if they do not fulfill the expectations, you do not pay them. Okay? But I think it's a really, really cool tool for entrepreneurs to look into. It might work for you, might not work for you. But my point is, be aware that options like this exist out there that might significantly reduce your cost of doing business. So nowadays, you can develop a website with the use of freelancers in a way that might be a much more cost-effective way than what you could do. Also think in terms of the opportunity cost. At the beginning, I started doing my own website. I have no idea. I'm not a designer. I'm not a programmer. I was wasting countless hours developing a mediocre website. Right? I could have paid a designer here $10, $20 an hour and would have a much better work product, much faster. And what is the cost of my hour? If you think about it, right? Is it cost efficient for me to spend 20 hours developing a mediocre website versus paying 20 hours at $10 for a good website? I mean, that's a consideration that you need to also take into account. And that's sometimes something that us entrepreneurs we do not do. We do think sometimes that we can do it all. And it's hard. Again, you need money, you need time, and you need people. You are great at some things, but not so great at other things. And that's where crowdsourcing could make a difference. Now, bring it all together. This is the book that I'm in the process of publishing. It's called Crowdful, Proof to be Successful in Business with Help from the Crowd. And it combines both the idea, which is crowdsourcing, and the money, which is crowdfunding, and how they work together to help you launch a business. And the reason why I use it as an example is because Crowdful in itself is a crowdfunded and crowdsourced exercise. It would be kind of awkward for me to do something like this without using the tools that I recommend in the book, right? So I actually use Fiverr for the original image. So this logo was provided by a Swiss designer for $5. Then I used Creative Commons for some of the images. As a matter of fact, that designer used Creative Commons to develop the book cover. Right? And everyone knows what Creative Commons is? Basically, it's open source creative assets. It could be photography that a photographer took and put in the public domain, so anyone can use it. It could be a logo, it could be a design, it could be so many things. They're architectural renderings and designs that are part of Creative Commons that you can use without paying any fee or any honorarium. So I did that. Then this is not the actual cover developed by the designer Fiverr. I actually didn't like the color, and I didn't like a few things of the font type and of what he had developed. So I did a crowdsource exercise on Facebook. So I put the two options, the original option and that option. And I asked my followers on Facebook what they thought, and for them to vote. Do you like the orange? Do you like the blue? The other one was blue, baby blue color design. And overwhelming majority chose this one. So, which was the one that I preferred anyway. But it was good to validate the idea with the crowd, right? Earlier someone said it's a great tool, crowdsourcing is also a great tool to validate whether you have a good idea or a bad idea. Maybe I have terrible taste, and launching something that will not work. It's good to have some testing. And I already mentioned the 99 designs. Now, I put this in here. That's the link to my Indiegogo campaign to launch Crowdful. So I actually am crowdfunding Crowdful. And I have about 16, 17 days to go. Last time I checked this morning, I was at 67% of the goal, so I'm doing pretty good. I think I'll reach the goal. And even if I don't, of course, Indiegogo will give me a portion of what I collect. But I think I'll achieve the goal. If you're interested in finding more about what I have explained or shared with you tonight, I have also created a page on my blog, which is titled Holyoke. So just go to silva-puras.com/Holyoke, and here there's a link to the Prezi. So the presentation, you just click there and you see the entire presentation I just shared with you. If you want to see my crowdfunding campaign, you can click here. If you want to contribute towards my crowdfunding campaign, of course, you can do it, and I have a special offer for those who are either here present or online. And I also put links to all the websites that I have discussed and some other resources like the Redevelopment Authority here at the City of Holyoke, Spark, some of the crowd lenders that I mentioned, some of the crowdfunders. One that I didn't mention earlier, but it's an interesting platform as well, is the donation crowdfunding platforms like Kiva. Some of you might be familiar with Kiva. It works primarily in the third world, although I hear that it's being used in the US as well. Basically gives very tiny donations for entrepreneurs to start their businesses in the third world. Reward crowdfunders and some of the crowdsourcing sites. And again, you can see all this if you go to silva-puras.com/Holyoke. And with that, my friends, I hope this has been interesting, that you have learned a thing or two, or at least that you have been entertained for the night. And I'll be glad to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
You said you were using the crowdfunding for your book. You mean for the printing of the book?
Yes, not for the printing. I'm I'm actually using the crowdfunding. My goal is $3,500, and I'm at, it's only at 2,700, right? I'm somewhere there. You can actually see it online. Anyway, that's my goal, $3,500, and that includes the fees for the copywriter, for the copy editor, for the layout designer of the actual book. The rest I didn't really consider as a cost, because even though I'm going to have a printout, it's going to be a printout that you can, it's going to be self-published on Amazon. It's a printout that you only produce on demand. Amazon allows you that. So you don't have to actually invest any money in printing any copies, right? If you order the book and you prefer, instead of the ebook, you prefer the printed copy of the book, you order it on Amazon, and they have a printing press, and they produce one book, and they send it to you. Of course, it's a bit more expensive than the ebook, but you know, it's a great way for me to control my inventory cost. Actually, I don't have any inventory cost. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves, and if you haven't got a chance to sign up with the sign-up sheet, we'd love to get your information so we can reach out to you for other events such as this. So thank you tonight.
Thank you.
That's pretty neat.
I'll be around.